Welcome to the Less Doing podcast, where you will learn how to start living more by doing less.
Let me help you optimize, automate, and outsource your entire life so you can focus on doing the things you love.
Now here's your host, Ari Meisel.
Welcome back to the Less Doing podcast. I'm your host, Ari Meisel, and I have the gift today of speaking with my friend, John Ruhlin, author of Giftology and an expert gift giver, among other things. So, John, thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Thanks for having me, Ari. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always great hearing you talk and having a chance to chat with you. So let's start really quick with a little bit of your background and how you got to be the gift guy.
Yeah, well, it wasn't part of the master plan. That is for dang sure. I grew up a farm boy, one of 6 kids in the middle of Nowheresville, Ohio, like 500-person town, one flashing light. So most of my childhood was doing manual labor, blue collar, like, splitting wood, living off the land, baling hay, milking goats every morning before school. That was kind of like my routine. But I was kind of an overachiever. I realized I didn't want to be a farmer my whole life. So I got really good grades to get out of Dodge and was going to go be a doctor because I thought they made all the money. And I'd make my mom proud, who was like into health and wellness and alternative stuff back when it wasn't cool to do that. And so in school, I'm desperate. I had started business. It was blue collar business, was making a lot of money, but I fell off a ladder at 30 feet. 2 different times. And I was like, this is dumb. Like, I'm never even going to make it through school, and started to look for other things. And I stumbled upon, through some friends, this internship with Cutco, the knife company, which, a lot of our mutual friends have, had a start, Hal Elrod and all of those guys started with Cutco. But I did it just out of desperation, and my life really changed towards the gifting realm and really just in general. Because I was dating a girl and her dad was an attorney, but he was the most generous person on the planet. Like, he was giving away, like, he'd find deals on noodles and give literally everybody at church, like 200 people, like 20 cases, like a year supply of noodles. And so I pitched him the idea of giving away Cutco because I thought, I'm desperate. I need to sell a lot of these knives. He gives stuff away all the time. Maybe he'll give away a pocket knife to all of his clients at Christmas. And so I work up the courage. I'm sweating bullets, and I pitch him the idea, and he really changed my life forever with one question, which was, could I engrave like a paring knife or something that's not like outdoorsy? And I'm thinking, like, all of his clients are like CEOs of insurance companies and home builders and lumber yards and these big companies. And they're like men. Like, you're going to give a grown man, like CEO, $1 million guy, like a kitchen tool? Like, that's weird. And he said, John, the reason I have more referrals and more deal flow than I could ever handle is that in 40 years of business, I found that if you take care of the family, everything else in life seems to take care of itself. And so for me, it was that kind of lightning bolt moment that I was like, wow, it's not really about the knife. Paul understands, like, like Robert Cialdini's book, Influence, talks about reciprocity and the psychology of giving and pouring into people and being a giver. And so I started to model that practice as a desperate 20-year-old wanting to get meetings with people. And so I'd find out, like, the CEO of an insurance company, $200 million company, and I'd invest $200 in a carving set, which is a lot of money. And I'd engrave the CEO's name, his wife's name, and put a handwritten note inside that said, carve out 5 minutes for me. I promise it'll be worth your time. And 2 weeks later, I get the meeting. And I walk in, and the guy is like in his 60s. It's a beautiful mahogany boardroom. And I walk in at 21. And he's like, I'm really confused. Are you here to sell me knives? Like, I was expecting like this seasoned sales executive in their 50s. And my answer would be, no, I'm here to help you and your 1,000 sales reps do exactly what I did to you, to your top 10,000 relationships. And his jaw would hit the ground, and I'd walk out of there for a PO for literally thousands of knife sets, not because I was a good salesperson, but because I was using the knives as kind of a delivery vehicle to get a result. And so by the time I was a senior in college, I had started to put med school on the side and had become Cutco's #1 distributor in the history of the company out of about 1.5 million people, because I was using gifting and gratitude as a competitive advantage, not as a check the box once a year kind of thing.
Yeah, well, and it's a great backstory, and not to back up too much on this, but Why? Yeah, and it's true. A lot of people that we know in our circle have gotten started with Cutco, and a lot of people may not be familiar with what Cutco is. So, can you just give a little bit more sort of illumination on that and why it seemed to be an opportunity that suited well some of the really successful people that we know now?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's a great product. I mean, it's a company that's been around since the 40s. It's in New York. It's handmade cutlery and outdoors tools, hunting, fishing, gardening, all that kind of stuff. And in the 80s, they were a small company, but they had a few entrepreneurs that said, "Hey, how can we sell this great product that nobody knows about?" And they said, "Why don't we start hiring college kids as like an internship? They'll get sales background experience, they'll get college credit, and they'll get welcomed in to show this great product because it needs to be demonstrated." And so they developed a sales training program and started to work with college kids. And those divisions of the company just took off like a rocket ship. So they went from like 5 million in revenue to 250 million in revenue over like 30 years because they took this great product, they put amazing sales training behind it, and then they started to work with college kids. And so they've literally worked with close to 1.5 million college kids over the last 30 years. But if you look at like Northwestern Mutual and Enterprise Rent-A-Car and some of these companies that have amazing internship programs for when you get out of college, they heavily recruit Cutco people, because if you can go out and build rapport, handle your own schedule, handle objections, and sell a great product to somebody that you've never met before, it's kind of like the Southwestern Book Company. So like a Rory Vaden and a lot of those guys are connected to Southwestern. If you can sell books door to door, there's not really anything else that you can't do. And if you can sell knives in somebody's house after only knowing them for an hour, there's not a lot of other things that are more awkward or difficult to do than that. So I think that, the Hal Elrods, John Vromans, John Berghoff, there's just a ton of people out there that kind of rose to the top of Cutco, but then they've gone on to do amazing things otherwise because of that kind of personal development that they got when they're in their 18 to 22 realm. And even now there's a lot of people that have made it a career. They've said like, I can actually sell knives and build a whole business around it. And even to this day, Cutco is still a top 10 partner for us. We're not sales reps for them, but they are a partner and a distributor for some of our products. So it's a wonderful company.
And that makes total sense. I mean, it's almost not that the 10,000 hour rule is not a real thing, but it's almost like that kind of idea, right? You're just getting this enormous amount of exposure to doing that kind of thing. And what's like one big takeaway for you from that training program in terms of sales?
Well, I think that having a process for things is really powerful. And so they teach you that sales process of how to build value, how to handle objections ahead of time, how to build rapport. They have a whole process for that. And you can obviously go off of the typical roadmap once you've memorized and really dove into that, but they really have a script and a process for everything. And so I think that, if you follow that and then make it your own, that's really what I did. And I took that product and said, hey, it's a great product. That's a great script. I'm going to go sell to all these people. And by the way, I'm going to start asking for business owners as referrals, which is another process they have. There's no door knocking or no canvassing. But I think that having that process dialed in and to make it repeatable and duplicatable is how they've been able to scale and train literally, in their biggest year, maybe 100,000 sales reps to go out where they have no sales experience. And then all of a sudden they go out and make a presentation on knives in somebody's house is kind of a miracle. But I think it goes back to that duplicatable process that they developed.
So that, and that obviously like rings true to my heart, but it's just an interesting thing to me because I learned sales for what I do, but and as comfortable as I am getting on the phone and selling somebody something, like the idea of selling a knife to somebody is like makes me want to shudder right now. It's kind of
I think most people are that way. I mean, I think that's why it's such a special company. And I've pushed all my younger brothers have gone and sold Cutco, and they're not still selling, but they sold it for a year or two when they're in college. And I think that they're, one of my brothers in film, one of my brothers is now working for an insurance company in operations. But I think that everything is sales. Like, I don't care if you're a teacher, if you're a pastor, like, even selling like your wife or your husband on marrying you, like everything is sales. Like people shudder at sales in general, but I don't think we realize, so you take a step back, how often and how important it is I don't care what position you have or what level or what industry, like it's one of those skills that everybody should really get exposed to. And most people shy away from, like, oh, I hate those slimy salespeople. And it's like, well, if you do sales the right way, it's not slimy, and it's a skill that is very valuable the rest of your life.
Yeah, and the other thing that I do have to say is, so I received a Cutco knife as a gift from Jason Gaynor from Mastermind Talks, which I know you had an influence on that, and
Yep.
it's got my company logo on it and the Mizell family, and it's such a nice knife, and I actually only use it for Thanksgiving, and it's so funny because every time I take it out, because I'm like always because we do Thanksgiving at our house we had 26 people this year, and my mom cooks, but it's like we host at our house, and every time I like take it out, I'm like so proud to show it. And it's just amazing, that little thing about you have my logo on it, not Jason's name or Mastermind or anything like that. And it just first of all, I can't help thinking about him and you every time I see it. And so,
isn't that weird? I've had people almost get half ticked off, like, John, I mean, and we have some people I've sent literally like Jeffrey Gittimer, I sent 18 gifts of knives over 18 months and built them like a whole $4,000 set. And a lot of these guys are like, man, whether I want to or not, I think about you. Like this silly knife thing, like, works. And in a lot of cases, people, you keep it for a special occasion, but most people aren't as meticulous as you are, and they use it every day. And so they're like, dang it, frickin' Ruhlin. Like, I'm thinking about them, and I don't even want to be like. And you talk about like cost per impression. I mean, I think that's where Jason got excited. He's like, nobody measures cost per impression when it comes to gratitude or gifting. And if you can get something in somebody's hands that they think of every day for the rest of their life, that's a pretty powerful tool. And so that's one of the things that we sell on is that daily use. Like, it seems silly to send a knife to somebody, but it is something that most people will get use out of on a regular basis.
Well, and you know what actually is really interesting to me about that is this is not just for knives, clearly, but when I've been a real estate developer for 15 years now, and one of the very successful real estate developers in this space who's no longer alive, but I met with him a few times when I was much younger, and he was really gracious to sort of give me advice and stuff. And one of the things he told me, which I always remembered and always acted on, was he would say, put money into the things that people touch. So put money into the doorknobs, to the handles in the kitchen cabinets, like the things that people touch, because that's what has like some of the biggest impression. And it's true. It's like, and that's not obviously not just knives, like a book. I mean, anything where it's tactile, like it means something.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's why the first 50 books that I made for Giftology, I invested $200 a piece in them. And I sent them to guys like, Gary Vaynerchuk and Seth Godin, and either mentors from afar or friends that were really influential. And that tactile nature of people do judge a book by its cover. They do judge a house by its doorknob. They do like all of we are tangible, visible, even in our digital age, like, those handful of things do matter. And so I think that people underestimate, why does the cabinet handles matter? Well, they do, because psychologically there's a little impression of its quality or not quality. It's like opening the door to a Lexus. The way the door shuts just feels good. And that sticks with people.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. So now you have to explain, though, how do you parlay this skill set, this inherent ability to sense these things, and how you turn this into an actual business?
Yeah. Well, I think that everybody says relationships matter in business. Everybody talks about like, it's all about relationship. It's all about the relationship with my employees, my clients. But most leaders, if they're honest with themselves, we get the keynotes, some pretty cool places like Google. Even there, like, oftentimes leaders say one thing and they kind of suck at showing gratitude on a consistent basis. And so we get a lot of times people reach back out after they hear a speak or teach or whatever else. And like, yeah, we're not very good at this. And so the core of our business is, from entrepreneurs all the way up to, $20 billion companies will hire us and say, hey, out of all the relationships we have 500 employees, we have, 5,000 clients, whatever, that are really important to us. And we're sending, Christmas cards and turkeys and bottles of wine and swag, or not, and gift cards, all that stuff. We're not very good at doing things that are really thoughtful and memorable and tangible. Can we hire you to outsource this to? And at the end of the day, like, that's the core of our business is people, whether it's the Chicago Cubs will take their top 400 relationships, or whether it's somebody that has 50 really important people, but they'll work with us and our team to develop a year-round or multi-year what we call relationship action plan. And it's really just kind of a simple calendar of here's the 4 times a year, the 2 times a year, the 10 times a year that I want to make sure that my most important people, that I'm most top of mind with them because that's where referrals come from, or that they feel the love and their spouse and their kids feels the love because that's going to generate whether or not they're going to stick with me as an employee. And so we just kind of map out who those people are, what the value of those relationships really are at a real metric number, and then back end into it. Hey, here's the 10 gifts we're going to do this year to those people, or here's the 3 gifts or whatever it is, and kind of blend that with all the other things that they're doing from a relationship perspective. And so, yeah, that's at core essence what we do every day.
And does this, I mean, what kinds of companies are you usually working with? I mean, big, small, different industries, like what's sort of the general avatar?
The sweet spot?
Yeah, sweet spot.
I mean, we have companies in EO that are doing 2-3 million in revenue, and we have companies like a Google or a Morgan Stanley or whatever else that might be doing tens of billions. I would say our sweet spot is kind of a YPO type member, Young Presidents Organization. It's that privately owned, faith-based or core values driven. So they're already a giver by nature. They just want to get better at it and automate it better, or have more of a strategy to it. Most people are very reactive when it comes to gifts. Like, oh, I got a referral, I better send a gift. And that's actually the worst time to send a gift, ironically enough. And so most of our clients would be in that 10 million to $1 billion in revenue, privately owned, faith-based or core values driven. Most of the time B2B, although we do have a number of high-level B2C companies, so like financial advisors, home builders in the luxury realm, or where a typical transaction, like you can't justify doing high-end gifts if you're Walmart. I mean, they're a bad example in general because they're not typically very generous or known to be the most generous when it comes to things. But a retailer, unless you're selling, Lexuses or something like that, you don't have enough margin to reinvest back into the relationship, because that's one of the core things that we teach people is you should be reinvesting from your net profit, not I don't care what your revenue or your gross is, what's your net. You should be reinvesting a minimum of 5% back into those relationships to ensure that they stay, to ensure that they grow. And the biggest thing is to turn all of your clients into raving fan salespeople for you. And that's really, a lot of times people are like, well, I already have high retention. I'm like, well, that's great, but how many referrals are you getting from all your top 100 clients? And if most people are honest, they're like, a lot of their business comes from referral, and they're not doing anything proactively to make sure that those people are on fire for you as a salesperson. And gratitude is one of those things that you can do on a consistent basis to turn them into on fire salespeople for you. And so, yeah, if you're a $500,000 business that's really profitable, we do have some of those kind of clients that maybe are a speaker. They don't have $500,000 in revenue, but that's pure, I don't say pure profit, but they have one employee. So we do work with a number of bigger speakers. But in general, that 10 million to $1 billion revenue is kind of like our target market.
So what kind of, like, in what situation, I mean, you mentioned a couple, but sort of generally speaking, like if there's people listening to this who have a company and they haven't really thought of this before, like what situation would they find themselves in where they would say to themselves, like, we really need like a gifting strategy?
Yeah. Well, I would say that if you have high value relationships, if you have, large numbers of clients that do a lot of revenue with you, or you have very valuable employees that you're in a competitive industry for employees, or you're trying to break into a new vertical, and your cost to get to land one client, if you add up all the sales, marketing, trade shows, entertaining, whatever, paying the salesperson, if there's a lot of money involved, and you're not growing as fast as you want to be growing, and you want to add fuel to the fire or accelerate, really what gifting does, if you do it well, it just accelerates the relationship. When you send something to somebody and they're like, wow, this person really knows me, I like that person, I trust that person, business is more likely to happen frequently, or the door is more likely to be cracked open. And so if you have a sucky business and there's a lot of other operational things that are wrong with your business, reaching out to somebody like us is a mistake, because, focusing on gifting when you just need to have your sales team return phone calls faster, or you need to have like your pricing buttoned up, like that's not going to, like, gifting will actually make it worse, because people are like, I just wish you'd return my phone call. Don't send me a $500 gift. Like, I don't need a gift. I need you to just be attentive. But if you have your business pretty dialed in and you're scaling or growing, and you're like, what can I do that nobody else in my industry is doing? What can I do that would have a cost a relatively small amount of money that would have a massive impact on sales and retention or growth or loyalty? Oftentimes most people look at gratitude and gifting as this, like, oh, a warm fuzzy, like, we had a profitable year, let's go buy bottles of wine or, an iPad for everybody. Like, that's usually, ironically enough, like, people think about gifting at the wrong times, which is the holidays, which is the worst time to give a gift because it's out of obligation. And so most people reach out to us when they're like, hey, I got things pretty dialed in, but I just want to go faster. And that's really the types of people that we want to work with more closely.
That's a really cool way to articulate it, I have to say, and that actually does make it very, very clear. You may not have the answer to this, but I feel like you probably do. Generally speaking, if you have people who are on an annual contract, for example, how many months or how many weeks or how many days in advance of that renewal is ideal to hit them up with something?
Well, if you're doing things on a year-to-year basis, like a lot of the pro sports teams will reach out to us and they're like, hey, we got renewals coming up in 6 months. We're thinking about sending this out 3 months before renewal. And I'm like, well, let's put yourself in their shoes. You're asking them to spend $250,000 and you want to send them this $300 jersey, and they're going to spend $250,000 because you sent them a $300 gift. Is that, what do you think that what goes through their head? Are they really like, oh my gosh, so thoughtful, like, renewals come in 90 days. Like, it feels like you're trying to bribe them or buy them, or it's a bait and switch. So our best situations are where people get far enough in advance where they send out a gift just because it's not anywhere near renewal time. And so, especially if you have multi-year contracts, do the gifting on the front end in year 1, year 2, and then year 3, you've earned the right. You've earned the business. You've loved on them when you didn't have to because it wasn't near renewal time. And if you want to do something 6 months ahead of time, great. But oftentimes people send gifts with the wrong intentions, or they're trying to manipulate a situation. And I think that, most people that are smart can read between the lines. And I think you actually invest money to have a negative thought or a consequence. Whether they ever tell you that or not is another story, because most people aren't very honest about what they really think of gifts. Like, nobody writes handwritten notes saying, I actually thought less of you as a human when I received this.
Yeah, right.
But a lot of times that's what goes through people's heads. And so I'm very much like, do gifting when you don't have to, and then you don't have to do gifting. It's already become a part of the process, and people want to renew with you because you have a great business, you've added value, and you loved on them when you didn't have to. It just becomes a natural progression.
Yeah, no, that's great. So what, I'd love to hear if you can think of this one, but what was one of the most interesting or unusual gifts you feel like you've facilitated the giving of?
The giving of, for somebody else or for myself to a client?
Either one, whatever one's
okay.
More weird.
More weird. I mean, I've sent out to like to like John Lee Dumas. I've sent, he's an entrepreneur on fire. I've sent him, like a sauna before. That was a pretty wild, weird gift. That was the first time I'd ever done that before.
No, just be careful because of the audience that listens to the show. We're not talking about Asana, the project management tool. He's talking about a sauna.
Yeah, like a wood box that heats up and gets really, you get hot and sweaty and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Oh yeah, not a sauna. So I mean, I've facilitated for when I first met Cameron Harold, who we both know. Like I'll do the abbreviated version. I wanted to get his attention. He was coming. I saw him speak at an EO event out in Vegas at a big university. And I heard he was coming to Cleveland, and I wanted to get his attention. And I thought the dinner and the ball game would be like the closer. Like, hey, I got Cavs tickets. LeBron's in town. It's opening night. Let's go for a steak dinner and go see a game. And his response was, I don't have anything else going on. I guess I'll go. And so, like, probably a lot of your listeners who do the typical dinner, ball game, round of golf, steak dinner, like most people, that's not a big deal. Like they get that 100 times a year. And I didn't realize at the time I was pretty green. So I'm like, I have to do something else. And I'm like racking my brain. I said, what else are you going to do when you're in town? And he said, well, I'm coming in from Vancouver, Canada, and there's not, the dollar's really weak. So I'm going to go shopping. And I'm thinking maybe this is my angle. I'm like, where are you going to shop at? And he said, Brooks Brothers. And on the spot, I'm like, I'm a Jose Bank guy. What's your shirt size? I want to send you a shirt. And he looks at me kind of bewildered, like, does this dude have a man crush on me? Like, that's a really weird forward question to ask somebody within 2 minutes of meeting them. But he's from, that Canadian charm and politeness. Like, he actually told me what a size was. And so I'm like, great, we'll meet up. And so 3 months go by the morning of, and I told my business partner this idea and he nixed it. And the morning of, Cameron starts texting me, my flight's delayed. I'm not sure if I'm going to get in time. Do you just want to cancel? And I'm like, son of a gun, he doesn't care about the dinner and the ball game. He wants to cancel on this. And I'm like, no, even if you get in late, we'll just go grab dinner. And so I call my partner back. I'm like, we have to do this. He's like, I think you're insane. It's going to come out of your personal draw if it doesn't work out. But if you believe in it enough, go for it. So 3 hours before he lands, I drive an hour up to Brooks Brothers. I put the Amex down. I said, I want one of everything in your new fall collection, all your jackets, pants, sweaters, belts, you name it. And the guys think I'm joking. And I'm like, with a deadpan face, I'm like, no, I want everything. And so it takes them an hour to gather everything up. And they start to ring it up. And I'm like praying that the Amex goes through, because when I saw the sign for it, it was $7,000 in close. I'm like, gosh, this better fricking work. So I drive over to the Ritz where he's going to be staying. Ask for the GM. I'm like, one of the top business coaches in the world is coming to town. Do you want to do something amazing? Of course, it's the Ritz. What do they say? They said, sure. What are you thinking? I said, well, I want to merchandise this hotel room to look like a Brooks Brothers store, jackets here, pants. And they're like, we've never been asked that before, but we can do that. So merchandise the room, go down to the bar. I'm like drinking. I'm not a big drinker, but I'm drinking like a triple on the rocks because I'm like, I am so nervous. And my partner gets there an hour later and he's in my ear like, he's going to think you're a stalker. This is the worst idea ever. And so Cameron arrives. It's like one of those travel days from, what, like he just has no desire to go to dinner and a ball game. He wants to go to bed. And I'm like, Cameron, go take a shower, come down when you're ready. Like, even if we miss the game, it's not a big deal. And he comes back down about 30 minutes later and he's glowing and he's like floating. And he's like, John, whatever you want to talk about for as long as you want to talk about it, I'm all ears. I've never had anybody, and I mean anybody, treat me this way. So, he's done things that $10 million in advertising couldn't do for me over the last 10, 12 years. Like, the reason I can charge $20,000 to go speak is because he got me my first $15,000 speaking engagement. Like, he's endorsed me from stages and in books. And if I want to meet the president of Starbucks, sure. He's a buddy of mine. Here, I'll open the door. Like, anybody that's in his Rolodex has now become part of my Rolodex. It's been insane.
Yeah, it's really, I've heard that story and it's so great, and kudos to you, man. Well, so now on the opposite side of that, are there some like gifting absolute no-nos or horrible gifts to give?
Yeah. Well, I think most people try to avoid pain more than they go towards pleasure. Like, even when I spoke at Google, they're like, $7,000 is a lot. And I'm like, you don't like, you have slides in your office. Like, are you serious? Like, that's really freaking you out. But like, you're missing the point. You don't have to spend that $7,000 on everybody, but there are times when it does make sense. I would say, as far as don't gifts, like, I actually, I created a PDF. I have a one pager because I get this question all the time, and it's like the top 10 worst gifts to avoid giving. And your tribe can go download it if they want. It's giftologybook.com/Ari. So ARI. And they can download the 10 worst. And it has not only the 10, but also an explanation. But like, one of the things I see people give on just a frequent basis, and even people that you think are good gift givers, is gift cards. And it's like, really, a piece of plastic that you basically narrow down where somebody can spend the money. And it basically shows, like, a gift is supposed to invoke a meaning of, that, hey, I thought of you in a really deep way, and I honor you, and I know you as a human. And a gift card basically says, I don't know you, or I didn't care enough to go take the time to even put any thought into this. And so I just decided to mail it in, and I'm going to give you a gift card. So, like, gift cards are one of the worst. Food, like, you don't know, people get food all the time. And I'm like, are you measuring the cost per impression? Because that nice bottle of wine or bourbon or ham or chocolate, like, it's going to be down the toilet in 24 hours. So, like, you get one impression. And two, like, in today's day and age, like, there's so many, like, people are keto and they have food allergies, and they're, like you, like this, like Crohn's or celiac, or their wife or husband is, or their kids are, like, there's so many ways you can offend people with food, and the cost per impression is horrible. And so food and alcohol, unless you really know somebody and you're like, they're really into bourbon, and I'm going to go buy them like a $2,000 bottle of Pappy just to blow their mind. like most of the time, like food and alcohol are two on the top 10 list of just to avoid in most situations. It's just not a good investment. So there's others on there, but the gift cards are and the food and alcohol are definitely in the top 3.
It's very helpful. I mean, especially right now, I've been looking at gifts for my team and stuff, and those were like some of the obvious go-tos, but they're just like, I've been procrastinating on it because they just don't seem right. So glad to hear. I'm glad to get that validation. So,
yeah.
Well, so John, this has been really great. Thank you so much. So you gave that URL for people to go to. Is there any other place you'd like to direct people to in general to check out?
No, I mean the book is on Amazon. I mean it hit some bestseller lists and whatever else. It's we've been really fortunate, but I think that the downloading the top 10 worst gifts to avoid, that at least you and your team or your assistant, whoever, like you can direct them, of where you want to go and say avoid these at least. The book is it's a quick 2-hour read, whether it's on Audible or Kindle or whatever else, but there's no Giftology 2 coming out anytime soon. So if I can get people to read the book and then become more generous and thoughtful gift givers as a leader, like I've done my work. I mean, we're on all the normal social media, Facebook, Twitter, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I love hearing about people taking action and going and doing something and then updating me on social that, hey, I did this and this is the response of the person, and that gets me going.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you again for your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us today on the Less Doing podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your friends. For more information about Ari and his groundbreaking methods, please visit us online at lessdoing.com and on social media at Ari Mizell. We'll see you next week.